Hello, welcome to the August 15th, 2023 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you've not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de or simply ask your questions in the live chat field. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer the questions in real time, especially as the live stream goes on, will soon be eclipsed, and I may not have an immediate response to particular questions. So if we could avoid asking the same questions over and over again, that would be appreciated. Know that if you have your question in the chat field, we will get to it chronologically. So if we could again avoid asking the same questions over and over again, if you don't get an immediate response, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase that you're using, whether it's Cubase, Elements, LE, AI, Artist, or Pro, and which level. So if you're running Cubase 10.5, 10, 11, or 12, and also which operating system. That information will be helpful. Realize that as we, we'll get through, as many of the questions as we can within about 4 hours of time. And we should, several hours after the live stream ends today, we should have all of the topics covered in the live stream with timestamps pinned to the top of the comments field that you could take a look at. And if you wanted to search for topics been covered in previous live streams, there's over 27,000 questions have been asked in the last few years. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan for creating that website. So once again, cubaseindex.com, you could search. We also want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude and Agent K, who serve as moderators. They don't work for Steinberg. They do this out of the goodness of their hearts to make it a better community. And also a special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work on the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for not only DAW users and the Steinberg community as well. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, primarily as a product specialist, focusing on Steinberg products, and I'll be the host for the live stream. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you're watching the live stream, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. So I saw a question, and it was probably just cut off before we got started. And I think it was from Sven Isaacson, who's just asked about sending chords and lyrics to the iPad, and it was a question maybe from the last live stream. So it's not a part of Cubase, but a part of VST Live that has that particular function. I do have a little bit of a cold, so I may be clearing my throat and coughing a little bit more than usual, but I feel fine. All right, so we see Don Arbus says, can't wait for Cubase 13 to drop, and Captain Energy Music says it feels like it's coming soon, so I think it'll be ready when it's ready. So we see Captain Energy Music just says he's glad I'm back and hope that we had a great family vacation in Maryland. So yeah, we had a wonderful time in Ocean City, Maryland, so thank you for the kind wishes. All right, so we have a question from, I think it's Moski Marketing. Question, in a 100-track project, I'd like to reduce -5 dB in all tracks at once with a single action. How can I do this the easier way? So if we have automation on tracks, so let's say we have automation here on all these tracks. So I could do this selected tracks, but we could do this with the Project Logical Editor. So if we come over here, let's go to our Project Logical Editor. We can create kind of a preset like this. We can say you want to take our media type is automation. We can say the container type is an event. We want to choose that we have the property is set to the parent object is selected. So that way we don't have to have open up every single volume automation, and then we could just choose volume here. So if we look at the fader, and what we want to do is, so we're going to select transform. As we come over here, we said these are the conditions. So basically we want to transform event automation, and then for the action target we want to choose trim, and we want to decrement in dB, and we can do 1 dB at a time. So if I wanted to apply this, let's say I have my automation set here. If we just look at our faders, we can now just decrement all of our faders down by 1 dB. So just use kind of, and this way we could just come over here and transform all of the volume automations down by 1 dB using kind of the project logical editor. So whether you're doing it for 8 tracks or 100 tracks, the process would be the same. So once again, just to look at that, we would go to our project logical editor, set up, and you could mirror those conditions. And I think there's some presets already in there as well. Okay, so value just says he likes lucky number 13. All right, so we see, will Steinberg come with a layout editor? Let me know what you mean by layout editor. This is from Yazian. So if let me know if it's like a keyboard layout, or what do you mean by a layout editor? I'm not, just to make sure I understand. All right, wonderful to see Stefan checking in from Sweden. All right, so we see from Patrick, hi Greg, I have a problem where some audio files I drag into Cubase are cut off at a random point. My workaround is to drag them into a sampler and then grab them from the pool. Any other solutions? So I haven't, nothing that's, I haven't seen when audio's been cut off. The one thing that you could check is if you go to the project setup to make sure that maybe it's not being dragged out beyond the project length. So let's say if I have, so I'll just switch this to seconds, and we'll go to I'm gonna get some let me excuse me, I'm gonna get some water real quick, hang on, sorry. All right, sorry about that. All right, so some water. So it looks like, you know, so I had my project like set to 10 minutes and dragged it in, and it automatically extended the length for me. So I'm not sure what would cause a particular audio file to not. So I'm not sure if, let me just reread it. So it says, so files I drag into Cubase are cut off at a random point. My workaround is drag them into sampler. So let me know if it's only with files are dragged in, or if you get the same results if you go to File, to Import Audio File, and see if you get the same results there. And if you have like a particular file that you want to share with me, I'd be happy to take a look at it. All right, wonderful to see Uno Memento from Finland. Okay, so we see kind of a follow-up from about the automation question we had still in the previous question. How can I preserve the group tracks and lower only the audio tracks so that I keep the actual balance on the group tracks? All right, so if we're in this situation where we had some audio, and I will go ahead and route these to a group track. All right, so we'll route these to a group. All right, now we could create this condition. So say we have a group, we have automation on our group. Okay, so let's go back to our creation, to our project logical editor. And we'll just come over here to the project logical editor setup. And we could say media type is automations event. We'll say track, and we'll also just set a condition to property is set to event is selected. So now if I adjust, let's say all of my automation, so now that if we just do for selected events, let me just take my automation off on all these tracks. Okay, so group these particular tracks. So just do a quick Q-link on that. So now we could see if we do this same particular automation and we look at our automation, since we could only do it on selected tracks, that as we do this, it's not going to affect the particular automation. We just come over here, I'll just write some new automation with the particular tracks here. Okay, so let's say if we come over, we'll see our group track automation. So now that we only have those particular tracks selected, it's not going to affect the group channel. So you could just have it based on the current selection. So give that a try. Sorry, waiting for my computer to wake up here. All right, so we have beats and meets. Maybe, just maybe, we're all finally going to learn how to use Cubase's, just question, how to use Cubase's ridiculous comping system for multi-track drums with multiple takes. I have my popcorn ready. All right, so let's take a look at it. So we will come over and we'll activate this project. All right, so on this project we have, let's say roughly, say 1, 2, 3, 4. 16 tracks. All right. And let's say for each of these tracks, when we open up our lanes, so we open up our lanes, we'll have 8 different passes on 16 tracks. So what I'm going to do is we'll close the lanes here, and I'm going to select all of my tracks. So what you want to do if you're going to be comping multi-track drums is we could do this with the Project Logical Editor if you have way more tracks, or if you just wanted to make it more convenient, you could just come over here. Let's get to, we'll just say, I think I have a preset from, okay, so we'll say close open all lanes. All right, so what I'm going to do is just open up, and we see we have 16 tracks of drums, and we have, okay, so we'll open lanes on the selected tracks. All right, so now we have our 16 tracks, and what I'm going to do is these are all placed into a folder, and then I'm going to enable group editing on a folder. So you see that now, once I have all the lanes visible, that I could grab my comping tool, and we'll say, let's do, I'm going to do my group editing before I open up the lanes. So let me just go back to my Project Logical Editor. Just so we can start this from scratch. Okay. All right, so I'm going to select all, I'm going to put it into group editing, enable that, select all of our tracks, open up the lanes. So now that the lanes are open, I grab my comp tool, just had this working right before earlier today, so I'm going to try just to reopen this project. Try one more time here. Make sure I didn't. Okay, so we have our audio tracks here. Let's open up all of our lanes again. So go to our Project Logical Editor, open up the lanes on selected tracks, and I'll hide this view. All right, so now when I grab my comp tool and I select, you notice that now I select lane 1, all of lane 1s are selected right here. So I think so if I click on lane 2 for all of the lanes. It's just going to automatically and then all you'd have to do is just kind of do your comp. And as you would audition your comp, at that point, those changes are made across all of your different tracks. So as soon as you open up the lanes for each of the tracks, do a comp on one of the lanes, and then that's automatically going to be applied to all the different tracks. So you have to put it into a folder, activate the group editing on the folder. I put it on the groups before. And then just make sure that the group editing, open up all the lanes, and you could just do this again with the project logical editor and go to setup. So here I took all selected tracks and then anything that is selected, and we could toggle the lanes, and then your comping can work just like you would normally do. So give that a try. Let me know if that makes sense for you. Beats and meats. All right, always wonderful to see Kerwin Young from Atlanta, Georgia. We see Benny from Sweden. Thanks for making it today. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on. And Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for being here. All right, so we see Soren from Sweden. All right, and we have Zephaniah from Detroit. Thanks for joining us again today. All right, and Value, of course, from Vienna. And we have Anthony from South Africa. We see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Okay, so we see RB World Music. Is there a way to duplicate tracks without the audio region being duplicated? I know there's a key command, but is there a preference to always duplicate without the audio region? So what you could do is, basically just, let's say if I wanted to, we'll drag a quick loop out here. All right, so if I wanted to duplicate this track with all of its settings, there's a macro, I believe, that comes with it, and my macro list is really long, so don't be intimidated by it, but I think we could, you could duplicate selected tracks without data, and you could assign a keyboard shortcut to this macro, and looks like that duplicated it with. But let me just come over. I'll try it one more time. And again, just go to macros, edit to macros. Hope I didn't change the macro, and so go to duplicate selected tracks without data, and then that would just simply make the particular track. So make sure that you don't have the event selected. And then just go to edit to macros, duplicate selected track without duplicate selected tracks without data. And then that will automatically do it for you. So no preference needed for that. All right, always wonderful to see David Glick on. Enjoyed your pictures you shared recently of Norway. All right, we have Patrick Emmanuel A. from India. Just happy to be on live. All right, so we see Connor Sykes. Hi, his question is, hi, I'm Connor from the UK. Thanks for joining us. Quick question, what is the main advantage of using Pro rather than Artist? So with Pro, it's basically unlimited tracks. You're going to have more high-quality plugins, better notation. It's going to have surround sound and Dolby Atmos support. You're going to have more comprehensive notation as well. So those are some of the main themes. There is a pretty comprehensive chart of differences. So let's say if we wanted to jump over, we'll just Cubase comparison chart. More insert slots, more. So when we kind of look at more instrument sounds, more plugins, you get more. Looks like the sends are going to be the same, but so you could see some of the various themes, the import tracks from projects, project logical editor, project browser, track archives, AAF, OMF support are going to be in the Pro, profiles, more exporting options. So just kind of look for the Cubase comparison chart, and that will go through. I think it's worth it getting Pro just for the additional plugins that you get with it. I think it's worth it just for the additional plugins that you would have to buy third-party solutions for. All right, so we have a question. How do you upload a video and a video track? When I do, it can't get it to play. I'm using Cubase Artist 10 Pro, so it could be, it's really going to be just a file to import video file, and then you should be able to just automatically have your video file that's imported. And then if you hit F8, now one of the things to be aware of is that video files generally aren't as standard as normal WAV files, so you might have to, and if you look for, if we go to video support, if you Google video support in Cubase, Nuendo, Wavelab, Dorco, and because what happens with videos is you have a codec, which is the compressor, decompressor algorithm, and a container files, and those need to be matched up. So you could use, if your video file, if you look at it, figure out what the container is and what the codec is of the file, and you may have to just simply get a utility. I think a lot of people use something like Handbrake, or there's a lot of freeware utilities to get it into one of these known container codec combinations so that the video can be played back in Cubase. All right, so we see from Patrick, I already own Isotope RX and I really like the quality of the unmix function as spectral layers. What else can spectral layers do that Isotope RX can't? I'm not sure if I should buy it as well. So I think that RX is going to be mostly focused, and I'm not a a typical user. I'm not a Isotope RX user in general. I don't have a current license for it or anything, so I may not be the best one to offer insights into like specific comparisons. But I think that Isotope, I don't think it works as an ARA2, so the integration is not as robust as what you'll have with spectral layers. So you're not being able to run it as an ARA2 editor. I think they have kind of their own editing interface that is not really standard within the industry. And I think that if you're doing more spectral editing, my impression is if you're doing more spectral editing, like frequency dependent, that probably spectral layers focuses more on that. And RX may do more like noise and filtering out clicks and pops. It may be more suited for that, but you would have to probably I'm probably not the best person to ask, but you could probably try the trial versions of either one. All right, so we have Plention checking in from South Africa. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you can make it today. All right, so Patrick Emmanuel A asks, Greg, in a key editor, I have random notes all around. I have pitch bend and other modulations. In B1 note, need to paste the automation in random places where B1 note appears. Is it possible with the MIDI logical editor? All right, so let me just create kind of a condition here. Jump back to this project. All right, just get this activated. All right. All right, so say we have some of our notes. All right, so say we have some B1 notes. All right, so it says in the key editor, I have random notes all around. I have pitch, bend, and other modulations in B1 note. Need to paste the automation to random places where B1 note appears. Is it possible? So, when we have, in general, so let's say we have, I'll just do we'll do pitch bend here. And let's say modulation. So in general, if it's going to be like I want random modulation within the cycle, we could probably so let's say if we have modulation, so I guess if we wanted the modulation, because these MIDI continuous controllers are not necessarily tied to the note position, but we may be able to create a macro where we could set the left and right locators. And let's go to our MIDI logical editor. So we'll come over here and let's see if we could randomize our modulation. So remove this. So we'll say, okay, we want to take our controller. So we'll say type is equal to controller, and we'll say also value 1 of that controller. We'll make it 1 for modulation. And what we want to do, and we want to set the position. Let's see if we can set the position between inside the cycle. And let's go ahead and insert, and we will say we want to transform. We'll set value 1 for our MIDI control. We'll say set random values. Let's say between 40 and 100. So let's say if we have our CC data here, so again we will select that particular note. And we'll choose inside cycle. inside range. And we'll just see if, so that way we could, so again, to come over here, say transform, you'll say type is equal to controller, we'll say MIDI controller is controller 1, we want to set inside of cycle with PPQ, and we'll say inside cycle, so that is when we select the particular B1 note, that we could now come over here and just randomize that particular MIDI CC only for that particular note. So if I come over here, and we could assign this in a macro if you wanted to, so we'll come select this particular note, and now we could just apply and have random values within the cycle for that as well. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, Patrick. But you could, go to, select every B1 note, or select B1 notes. You could do a macro, select, B1 note, then run that MIDI logical editor preset. But let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish. All right, so we see, hi, some plugins, Sonable SmartGate doesn't work as an offline processor. Do you know any other way around this, not as insert? So I'm not sure, what, there's nothing, I don't think, specific that would set it up. So let's say if I duplicate this particular event here, and let's set, I'll create a new audio event of these two. So come over here, bounce selection, and let's say if we go to our plugins, I'll just get to my direct offline processing, and we'll just come over to under dynamics to gate. So a lot of times you may not necessarily see it, but see if you get kind of the results that you wanted to accomplish, like here. So we can say, okay, as we go through kind of our gate, we can see the changes automatically applied directly to there. So if this seems to be kind of working as expected, if it's not working with a particular plugin, it's probably not going to be a function within Cubase, but maybe something that particular plugin is missing or lacking. Sorry about that. All right. All right, so we see a question. Hello, Greg. When you delete an audio file from the audio pool trash basket, does it delete it from the hard drive, or do you have to do any extra step to free up the memory? So I believe it just deletes it directly from the hard drive. Let's go ahead and give it a test. All right. So I'm going to set my record folder to the desktop. All right, so let's go ahead and record. Okay, so we will go and look on our desktop. And we'll see our delete me file here that we have. All right, so now I want to, let's go ahead and I'll undo the recording. So I will come, so I just erased it. So I go to my media, and let's go to our pool window, and you hit so now we'll see delete me. So I'm going to empty the trash. And it says, do you want to erase or move from pool? So I believe when we click erase, that at that point we go back to our Finder, and the delete me 01 has just been erased. So it will erase it if you choose erase. If you say remove from pool, it'll leave it on the hard disk and will be erased from within, referencing it within the project. All right, so we have Bren from New Jersey. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer Sr. has strep throat. Sorry to hear that. All right, so we see RB World Music. Will Cubase ever be available to work with Splice Bridge? So I'm not sure if that's the. I'm not that familiar with Splice. I know that you could purchase Cubase on Splice to own, or if it is just allows you to audition to different samples. There's obviously a lot of Steinberg users that are using Splice, but I could follow up and do some more research. But if you could maybe let me know if that's like a bridging software that allows you to. But you know, I know a lot of people obviously work with Splice inside of Cubase, or if that's a special kind of integration feature. If you could let me know. Okay, so we see Yazian just says, I would like to change the theme editor from Cubase 12, icons, logos, and to faders. So I don't think that that's what, I don't think that, you know, we could change some of the different functions inside of Cubase, like color-wise, but, you know, I don't think they necessarily want, you know, everyone to have like custom faders and stuff like that, because it could be for project compatibility could be problematic when sharing files. But you know, there are different functions for, you know, color schemes for different parts of the program, but I don't think it's going to be like changing faders and stuff like that. All right, and we see a question, is it possible to get an FM Lab free trial? So let's just check it out and see. Just see if there's... Just see if there's... And I think, let's see if there's Hallian 7 trial, and that may... So I think maybe there may not be an FM, maybe not an FM lab trial, but you might be able to try it within Hallian 7. So we'll just take a look. So, but try and just see. I think you might be able just to get a Hallian 7 download, which may allow you to play around with the FM lab. All right, so we see question. In Groove Agent, can I change sound of any tom to be kick sound or any other sound? Cubase 10 using a Lesis Nitro electric drum, but kick pad is broken, so I want to trigger tom, give kick sound. So really all you'd have to do is we'll come over here. So if it's going to be like so we'll just come over here. So let's say if it's an acoustic agent kit, what you would want to do is, let's say we get to our instrument sound, and we can see that this kick is going to respond to C1, and so we could have our MIDI notes. But if you right click, or if you just click here on this particular icon, like this little drum stick laying over the drum, then you could right click on a particular pad, and then you could say edit learn MIDI trigger note, and you could assign the particular notes directly from here. Or if you click on edit learn trigger note, you could then hit your tom pad, and that tom pad will now trigger like your kick sound. So whatever sound you want, just make sure that if you don't have this turned on, you can't right click to edit learn the particular MIDI drum note. But if we come over, right click here, as soon as this is enabled, we can come over and click on edit learn trigger note. So let me know if that will be helpful, but that should allow you to assign like a tom pad for your kick drum or whatever else you want to do. All right, so a question. Hello, if I purchased Spectral Layers 10, should I need to remove Spectral Layers 9 or just install 10? All you have to do is install 10. Your version 9 will still be. I think that version 9 will still be on your system, but you don't have to uninstall version 9. You could install 10, just as a separate program. All right, wonderful to see Razel checking in from Denmark. All right, and wonderful to see Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. All right, so we see question from Zephaniah. Is there a way to master your music without using the mastering project using Artist 10 on PC? So, it could really, it really depends on what you would consider mastering. So a lot of times what people would consider mastering is, maybe like kind of cumulative, like, stereo bus processing. So, there is a template for mastering. You don't have to use that, but what a lot of people will do is just go to like the master section, and if you wanted to even go to different track presets, you could even just, let's say we jump here, we'll go to our presets, let's go to track presets, audio, and then if you wanted to do mastering, you could just drag and drop different track presets right from here. So, okay, I just want to do mastering, just drag and drop that right to your master fader, and then that could open up kind of the whole effects chain for you. So you could definitely kind of, now if you consider mastering, adding all the metadata, burning DDP images, making CDs, making DVDAs, making a high resolution format, making 6 other compressed formats, then a tool like Wavelab would be what you would want to do. But if you wanted to just apply some kind of overall processing on your particular song, you could do it very easily in Cubase Artist. Okay, so we have a question from Lars. Hi Greg, after making a flat mix arranger track, the project has only a length of, let's say, 120 bars, but I need it longer at the end. How can I change the length of the project? So if probably what you need to do is to go to your project, to project setup, and then you'll see project length here. So try adjusting your project duration longer, and then that should allow you to have longer projects. All right, so we see, wonderful to see Volker on. I'll just read his comment here. And Volker saying Cubase is boring for him as a user of 35 years. Sometimes I think the program is a parallel world for me. Always editing everything makes me sick. But work with Cubase is really fun. So, all you have to do is, realize that you can have perfection in anything, but, sometimes it's like every classic composer needs a, basically just give yourself a deadline so that you don't get into, so that you have to get it done. And, I remember when we had Michael Wagner on one of our Zoom meetup sessions maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And, he's talking about kind of classic mixes of like Extremes More Than Words or Master of Puppets. And I think the topic came up, how would you, is that the best mix you could do? And he's like, that was the best mix I could do that day. And then it's done. And then we just move on from there. So, give yourself a deadline, and that will always kind of, help with stuff like that. All right, wonderful to see Fernando Gallegos on. All right, and we have Snoise Music from Polska. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Beats and Meats, is there a quick way to quickly move between tracks? For example, if I need to see the kick and snare are both on time on the grid, how to quickly switch my view to see various tracks in the group. And let's see if this is maybe with the, this is probably with the comping. So let's say if we want to, see your kick and snare. So let's say, okay, I want to have my kick and snare, if they're just kind of, directly next to each other, that way you could just see, but if we collapse the lanes, so let's say if we come here and we have these two tracks selected, so once we have kind of our comp done here, so let's say, and I'll just open these up and again, we'll just say, okay, we could see our changes between these two events. So let's say, okay, we go to our kick 2 and snare, and at that point we could zoom in, and then if we, if you assign just a keyboard shortcut to that Project Logical Editor, at that point you could toggle. So, once you have kind of the comp, you can say, okay, here's my kick and snare. And then if we assign that to like a MIDI remote function, you could just look at those particular tracks and close them and do your editing on the grid like that. You see Jazz Dude sharing a Robert Dudzik video, and Robert is incredible to watch his sound design stuff, and such a wonderful guy too. Okay, so we see question from RK. Is it possible to see your arranger section names without seeing the event names? All right, so let me open up project with some arranger tracks on it. So just open this up. All right, so we see our arranger track names, and I think if we go to our preferences, we could say event display. Let's see if we uncheck show event names, if that also is carried over. Yeah, so if it looks like, if you hide the event names, I'll just reread the question here. And we could think, so if we have if we show the event names, we could think of that as being the name for the particular, we have our event names here, for each particular track. So we have our event names, but these are the event names for the arranger. So if you turn off the event names, it'll do it for the arranger track and for audio or MIDI events. But let me know if I misunderstood. All right, so we have John Neves. Hi, Greg. Can I separate drum parts from a single drum audio track? So if you have something like a drum loop, if you have Spectral Layers Pro 10, so let's say if I want to do that, one of the things that you could do in Spectral Layers is if we go to the extensions, that will open up Spectral Layers. We can now double click, and we could at this point choose to, if we go to unmix, we could say unmix drums, and this is intended to kind of break apart like kick and snare. So we will go ahead and hit OK. And now kind of as we play this particular event, so let's say we'll come back here and and if you like, we don't really have hi-hats, but you could kind of separate kick, snare, and drums, kind of like that, using Spectralayers Pro 10. It's not a part of Cubase, but is going to be kind of sold separately with that. All right. I have to just check a quick message. I'll be right back. Hang on. All right, I'm back. All right. All right, so we see from Beats and Meets, also when using the comp tool shown, it's kind of weird selecting a range while doing comps, because who knows when a take starts to get wonky. What's an effective way to split all the lanes and just scroll through the song from all right, so it says, and this will just jump back to the one project here. Okay, so let's say we have all of this. So also when using the comp tool shown, it's kind of weird selecting the range while doing comps, because who knows when the take starts to get wonky. I mean, just if you were comping one single part or multiple parts, it would really kind of be the same situation. So, you could just, it's just part of doing the edits, and, so it's not really, I think if we come over here and say, okay, we're going to take that particular part from that one, that, you have to just kind of, you don't, just do the edits until it sounds bad and find another part. All right, so you see, what's an effective way to split all the lanes and just scroll through the song from beginning to end? So, once we just grab the comp tool, so let's say if we are here, so at this point, once we go to a particular area and we have, the comp tool, activated, so, really all you'd have to do at that point is, just choose just that portion. It's going to split all of your different drum tracks for you. So, and then all you'd have to do is just simply play. So, all right, so we see from value question, how to remove background noise with Cubase 12 Pro, Windows 11, maybe the Spectralayers inside of Pro without buying 10. So there are, some ways of being able to, get rid of, I don't have, once I have the Pro license installed, I don't necessarily have access But if you wanted to do some basic restoration functions, if you have Wavelab will have a lot of great functions for restoration. So you could, it has built-in restoration tools. You also can, come over. So if you had to do restoration, with the, if you had just the basic Spectral Layers 1 that comes with Cubase 12, version 9, you could, come over here and just say, okay, if you can find kind of the isolated frequency noises, you could just kind of get rid of it like that manually. So you could do spectral editing directly within, but the full version will have the capability of doing processing and taking, if you wanted to, do noise reduction, where you could actually take a particular noise profile. So if you have a little bit of the noise, you could just say, okay, I want to come over and, just take a bit of, the noise reduction and be able to, find that spot and be able to do it. But probably the best solution for that would be, getting the Spectral Layers 10 Pro and, utilizing that as well. Or, or you could choose to just take the file, edit in Wavelab. And if you're looking for just like a simple kind of restoration functionality, even in Wavelab Elements, you'll have just a quick plugin. These don't come in Cubase, but if we go to, let's see, under restoration, that you'll have the Restore Rig plugin. So this would give you declicking, denoising, and debuzzing all kind of within one tool. So if you have Spectral Layers or Wavelab Elements or Wavelab Pro, you could just simply do the select a particular file, go to edit in Wavelab, and do your noise editing there. All right, wonderful to see Peter from Montreal and Harry Olive and Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it today. See, Peter says it seems like he's having problems with his chat window. Wondering if other people were. All right, so we see from Beats and Meats, just probably going back to our drum, is there a way to make the right mouse click button split all the lanes in a group? That would be super fast instead of having to draw a region and then adjusting the size to make your take splits. So let's jump back to that particular project. All right, so let's see if I don't think that the scissors tool is, but let's try with, so just try holding down the Alt or Option key, and then you could split across all of the lanes. So let's say if I'm here, and again, I'll just start with no edits here. So if you wanted to split, hold down the Alt or Option key with the, so right now we have all this, but if I wanted to split, just hold down the Alt or Option key with the comp tool, and then it's going to split, and then you don't have to define the end point. So you'll see that as you hold down the Alt or Option key with the comp tool, it just turns into like a little scissors, and then you could split all of your lanes like so. It's not the right mouse button, but I think Alt or Option plus clicking with the range tool makes a lot of sense and it's probably just as fast. so we see just a question saying Yam's question wasn't answered, or Yam's question. But maybe if you could just enter it again in the chat field, that'd be great. Sorry, people are seen having problems with the chat today. All right, so we see from Alex says, "Hey Greg, back on the multi-track drum comping. The way you showed us is already easily what I do, but it becomes very time-consuming and slow to work that way when you have around 20 drum tracks. How do we comp like that and be able to see all the tracks in question? I need to be able to see at least 5 of the tracks when I'm comping, so I know that I'm getting the correct takes comped in. So, if you have 20 tracks of drums." And it could be that, maybe instead of doing, and the question was originally about how to do this, comping multi-track drums with lanes, but it could also maybe be a different approach might be to work with track versions. So if we have all these set up as, track versions, instead, you could, so I'll just do like a quick new project here. So we'll say, all right, this is our drums. All right. Just so, sometimes if you're going to have, like 20 tracks and 10 comps, that's going to be 200 tracks. So that could be a lot to work with. But another method, if you wanted to do this, and this is often what I prefer if I'm doing like a full band, is let's say I just come over and we hit record. So all right, and then with all these tracks, I'll just say, let's create a new version for all the tracks. So this would be like take 1, take 2. All right, let's do take 3. And then we'll say, let's do one more. All right, so now at this point, I can say, okay, well, let's just do a new version. And I say, well, I really liked, version 1 for the beginning here. So what I could do is just kind of select, so we could just, let's say let me just set my snap to beat. Okay, so I like this. I want to do a global copy. So if we go to like our range, so we'll say global copy, let's go to version 5, and then let's Alt or Option plus V, which is paste in place. Or paste at origin. So make sure I got this. there's obviously, you could use the keyboard shortcuts for this, but we'll. So let's say if I'll split. Then you could say, okay, I really like take two next. So I want to take these parts from take two. We could split. We'll select. And let's say this is our final drum comp. And we will paste that. And let me just go back to where. So we come here. I will copy. So just Command Control C. And then come back over here. And then, you know, this one version could be a comp of different versions. So if you want it to be more manageable, consider maybe using track versions. That way, you know, but if you are dealing with, you know, 200 different tracks of data, you know, it can get big. And, you know, but maybe consider using track versions, may be more manageable for you. All right, so we have Diego. Dante asks, hi Greg, I have a UAD and a patch bay. My signal go from the UAD at my patch bay, then at my sum. How can I see and control the return from a signal without print every single time? So I'm not sure what UAD you have, if it's a DSP card or if it's like a hardware processor. So usually the UAD is kind of the, so, or if it says my signal goes from UAD at my patch and then at my sum, how can I see and control the return from a signal without print every single time? So if you could answer, Diego, if you know if it is what UAD, if it's like a hardware compressor or EQ or channel strip, and if it is kind of a hardware channel strip, you know, you may want to consider just going to your audio connections and going to external instruments and or external effects rather, and where this is connected, you know, you could connect your UAD to available inputs and outputs of your audio interface. So I'm not sure if you're running like an Apollo interface, like, or but if it's hardware, you could say, okay, this is going in and out of, you know, outputs, you know, 4 or outputs 3, and then all you'd have to do is when you go to an insert effect, come over and you'll see external plugins, and then you can say, okay, I just wanted to run my distressor, and then you could just have that automatically compensate for the hardware delay compensation. So we could just simply compensate for that as well. But let me know if it's hardware UAD or if it's a UAD DSP card. That would be, you know, that would be helpful information for me. All right, so we see from Plastic People Records project, both audio and instrument tracks. I take a 9-bar loop from audio, right guitar, then duplicate across, say 8 bars. I lay down a 4-bar synth, 1 track, render in place, allow for tail. Now the tail makes event longer, not fit the audio. Can I overlap the audio events to make fit, like dub in overlap? Okay, so let's see if I could create this. All right. Okay, so I'll just kind of start with a new project here. And we'll just grab some quick drum loops here. Okay, so let's say we have 9 bars of drums. And let me just add a quick instrument. Alright, I'll just take these effects off. Alright, so let's say I have Alright, so I'll just see if I can recreate this and throw some delays in. Alright, so say Alright, so let's come here. So let's say we want, I want this, and we'll go ahead and just duplicate that. So let's say I will open up the instrument, so turn the delay off, and I'll just add a delay as an insert on this particular track. And we'll make it just a quick mono delay of a quarter note. We'll do, let's just make it 1/8 note with low feedback. So now listen to it. Okay. So both audio 9-bar loop from audio and alright, so we say 8 bars of audio laydown, 4-bar synth, 1 track render in place, allow for tail, but now the tail makes the event longer, not fit the audio. Can I overlap the audio events to make it fit like dub in overlap? You know, so if the tail is, you know, set up, you know, so let's say if I wanted to render in place this synth part, so let's say we have, and a lot of this is coming from the delay. Let's start it out here. So let's say if we want to, let's render this in place. So I will just make sure I'll do this as one single event, and for our tail size, I'm going to set it to 0 for now, and let's go ahead and render. All right, so now we're just listening to just a rendered file. So, you know, you may not, all right, so you see project, both in audio and instrument tracks, take 9-bar loop from audio and duplicate across, say 8 bars. Okay, done that. So lay down a 4-bar synth, 1 track render in place, Allow for tail, but now the tail makes event longer, not fit audio. Can I overlap the audio events to make it fit like in a dub overlap? So, so it could be that, maybe try setting this, so I'll add a tail of like 1 bar to our render in place. So we'll come over here to edit and we'll choose render in place. So we'll get to our render settings. We'll make it a 1 bar tail. We'll do this as separate events for just those particular events here. So, and what we see is that, the tail will be, this will be so we'll go ahead and just have the rendered file play. So depending on the effects, I mean, if you need the tail, if you wanted the tail to cascade, then, you would need it to be longer, but you might be able, if you wanted to just loop perfectly, just come over here and let's say as we rewind, so often when you want the additional tail is, maybe at the very end. So you may not need the tail if it's going to be kind of looped or continuously going on. But the very last one, you may want that tail to be there, to cascade naturally. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. But, you could always try to just, render, just resize that particular clip, or see if you actually need the tail, because if you want it to be the same length, then maybe a tail isn't the best choice to use. All right, so we see from Ace Amadeus, great to see you on. It says, I'm making edits on my laptop to violins for my Konica ensemble. I don't have access to my MIDI controller. Is it possible to draw the mod wheel movements with the pencil tool? Thanks. Yeah, so if we have just, we'll come over here and let's say we'll just have like modulation data. So really you could draw it in very effectively with just, let's say we wanted to draw in modulation that was going on. You could use the line tool. So let's say if we grab a line tool, we wanted to go straight up and stop, right at the grid. We could do that. We could also just kind of select that information, and if we wanted, to, let's say we could, select the events, so you could just, you could draw it in with the pencil tool if you want. So if you wanted to draw in, or if you wanted to use the line tool to just kind of draw in, you could easily do that as well. So you don't need to have a physical keyboard controller to enter in that data. You could just draw it in with your mouse using either the pencil tool or the line tool, and you could have different shapes for the line tool as well. All right, so we see Esteban Carlos Benson. Great to see you on. And this question is, hello, I have trouble playing back samples from the media bay due to the control panel. I'm able to play back samples through the control room, but I can only select my monitors or headphones at a time. So if, you could really depending on your audio interface, so, if you have the preference set up, so there's a preference in Cubase, and you probably know this if you're either doing, one or the other, that you could come over here and just say, okay, the use phones channel as the preview channel. So if I have that set and we have that turned on, I hit apply. When I go to audition, now everything is going through my phones channel. The vast majority of audio interfaces will mimic the stereo output by default to the headphone output. So let's see if I have in my URC, see if the control panel will pop up here. All right, it's because I'm inside of Cubase. But so if you wanted to go out of your, out of the control room routing and your headphones, you try to, most audio interfaces, again, will mimic outputs 1 and 2 out of the headphone output. And that's pretty standard. But, if it's not set up that way, try to see if you can get that set up. And that way you could preview through the headphones and the audio interface simultaneously. But, again, just check this preference here. And you want to make sure that if you wanted to send it out of both devices, probably just come over here and make sure that the phones channel is deactivated. Now, there's also an option for exclusive device ports for channels. So if that is turned off, you could go into your audio connections. Let's go to our control room, and I could say my phones is going out of outputs 1 and 2, and let me see if I had that preference set the way I think I do. Okay, so I guess that's not going to work with the phones, but check just to make sure. If you wanted to only go out of, if you want it to be mimicked where you're hearing it from both devices, check your audio interface routing, and then you could probably, if it's not set by default, if it's where you could set it to be independent, you could probably set it to be default as well, so that the whatever is going out of your master output is going out of your headphones as well. And one other thing you could do also is, like, within the control room, you'll see like this little button here. So this could just turn off the speaker routing to the speakers. So, you could try just to turn that off. So like when I'm doing headphone only stuff in my studio, I'll just kind of turn that off right there. And then it's not going out of the speaker, and it's just going out of my headphones. Just that little on button next, just to the left of the word main in the control room. All right, so you see Yam. I don't think anyone can see your question, but we can see that we can see your question of anyone can see your question. So, all right, it's wonderful to see Braxel. Hope you're doing well in Texas. All right, so we see Braxel asks, Greg, can you explain how Cubase 12 splits a stereo insert? Example, 2 outboard compressors on a stereo channel, 1 compressor for each side, left and right. So if if let's say if we have, or let's say I'll create a stereo compressor here in my external effects. So let's add an external effects, and we'll say stop shouting at everyone. Okay, so I will take it on this track. We'll do it as an insert. All right, I'm just going to reread. All right, so but let's say, all right, and I'll just, in my audio connections, let's also just say we have distressor as mono, and I'll add another distressor too. Okay, so if we're on a stereo track and we go to just our inserts, we'll go to external plugins. So say, okay, I have mono compressor there, and then I could go to another mono compressor here. So we'll say, and let's say I'll just add a stereo compressor here while we're at this point. Okay, so now all we would have to do is, let's see. All right, we'll open up the channel strip, our channel editor. So as we do that, we'll come over, and so right now if we go to our routing, we could just say, okay, this is going to be mono and mono. So we can say, okay, I want this to be patched on the left channel, and I want distressor number 2 to be, let's make this mono as well. So now let's make sure I had it selected as, so now I will come over and let me just see if I check my connections again here. Okay, I'm just going to make this, sorry. I'll remove that. I made it a stereo. So let's add an external effects. I'm going to make it mono this time, and we'll call it distressor 2. We'll call it distressor 3, just so. Okay, so we go to distressor 3. Okay, so now we're back on our channel. Okay, so we're going to say, so now I'll just come over here and say, okay, we want it to be linked there. So each one that we could now come over and have our different channels linked. So that's how we could do it. Now, if you're doing with like a stereo, you know, we could again just kind of come over here. So this way we could have one channel of the compressor here with independent settings and another channel here with different settings, one going to the left channel, one going to the right channel. So you could play with the routing for your mono sources even on a stereo track. Okay, so we have Lars who just says, could you please explain the render in place function? So what the render in place will allow us to do is, let's say we have a number of edits, just kind of like what we, you know, what we had just done. So I wanted to take, all right, so let's say I have, what rendering in place will allow us to do is to take, you know, instrument parts, or let's say if we have a number of edits in a particular file here, maybe, okay, I want to take this, I wanted to mute this, I wanted this one to be louder. So let's say we have a number of different edits in multiple events. One of the things I could do is choose to just do a render in place, and we can go to our render settings. What this will do is take either an instrument track or an audio file, whatever is selected, and then we could create a new file. So we're going to render in place this, and we could choose to make it dry. We could have our different channel settings. We could have our complete signal path. Like if we had effects, we could include our EQs, our inserts, our send effects like reverbs, delays, our master effects as well. We could add a tail as we were just discussing. So right now I have let's say 5 different audio events. I want this to be rendered as a clean, brand new audio event. And since I have it set for external processing, which I'll just go ahead and abort, just get rid of this since we actually don't have those connected. So now I have my different tracks set up here. We'll just do a quick render in place. So that will basically create one audio file that is the result of all of these edits. And if we wanted to turn a virtual instrument part, and let's say this instrument is taking a lot of processing power, and if I wanted to turn that instrument track into something that will just play back in the standard audio file, we could now at this point, and there's different options where if I wanted to disable a particular track, that you could do that within, so that's not taking any CPU cycles, and now we could get all the effects of the particular event just kind of rendered internally as an audio file without having to play back different instruments that could take more CPU power. So it's a way of kind of taking something that's maybe an audio file or an instrument that's taking a lot of CPU power through the effects and turning that into a pre-baked audio file so that just the audio file plays back, freeing up system resources on slower systems. So that's kind of what render in place does. All right, so we have from Alexi Boyko ask, I just want to confirm that if F3 pre-gain is applied to the signal before any processing inserts channel strip, it seems to work for nucleus library, but I had a problem with Spitfire $98 orchestra pack. So the audio system, like once we're in our audio interface and we go to our pre-gain, so let me just make sure I have it active here in the racks. This will, this gain here will come before the inserts, EQ, or channel strip. So that's how it'll come. So that will give you gain before it goes through any of the inserts, EQ, or channel strip. Sometimes with some orchestral libraries, you may not notice it until you move a play note, and the modulation wheel may control the dynamics. If it still seems like really soft, then it could be just how the expressiveness of the library is designed. So you might have to have your modulation wheel actually just kind of turn on the particular functions for you. All right. All right, so we see a question from Ace Amadeus. How to lower the same value of volume on a laptop group? Let me just make sure I have that. So how to lower the same value of volume on a laptop group of tracks, for example, lower -3 on 7 drum sounds located on 7 tracks. All right, so if we just, let's go back. Okay, so if you wanted to, automate those particular changes, so say, okay, I want to take these particular tracks, so I'm just going to select them here. All right, and these all have automation. We'll go to our mix console. So if we have these particular tracks selected and I wanted to, automate their particular changes, I could come right over here. We'll enable Q-Link. And then as we, just enable write automation, so we have write all on. So with Q-Link, I could take all those tracks, and if they're automated, I could automate them all at once proportionally. If there's no automation, you could just simply select the tracks, and you could activate Q by holding down Alt or Shift or Alt Option plus Shift, and then or just enable Q-Link right there. Whatever tracks are selected, you could just adjust like so. All right. Thanks for your question, Ace. All right, we see Volker's taken off. All right, so we see from Braxel, Greg, how do you print your stereo final mix back into your DAW through your interface, or do you do it another way? So what I would do is, so let's say I was doing a quick export. So let's say I set my left and right locators, so I don't print it back through my audio interface. I would do my export audio mix down, and in the after export section, what you want to do is to create audio track. So I'll just come here, we'll export audio mix down, we'll take all those different elements, and now it's created a stereo audio track and place it sample accurately directly in the project. So again, come over here, go to File menu to export to audio mix down, and after export, choose create audio track. Then it's just going to be played back in, and I always like to have the stereo mix down within the same project of the project. Often I'll mute it, but just to keep all the file organization so that if file got lost, I could open up the project and the mix down file is there waiting for me. All right, so we see a couple people, just Gurjat and Yam, having problems with their questions. So if if you're, and I see Michael Pierce raised a great point of not putting any links in, or make sure it's under 200 characters. All right, so we see a question from Harry Olive. Good day, Greg. Does Cubase contain a simple stereo panning plugin? I'd like to fix some missing software reference ID room correction options. I'd like to add to control room inserts. So let me just open up a quick project here. Great. All right, so let's come over to our control room, and we'll go to our inserts here. And so if you want to go to, so if you wanted to, I will, one of them that you might be able to do might be under modulation. It's just going to be the auto pan. So if you wanted to, here we could set it to You know, if you wanted everything to be set left, or there's probably presets for this as well, but so if you want that to be all the way kind of favoring the left side, then we can set our width to 100%. And then if you know, so if you wanted to switch it, and you could obviously say presets of this. Then it's going to be on the right side, so you could have different. So I'll just call this right channel. And I'll just move this one more time, and we'll save it as left. I'm sure there's faster ways of doing this. All right, so we'll save a preset. Now we go left only. Let's load preset. If you want to go to right. And then you can just switch back to left. So let me know if that would kind of meet your needs, Harry. All right, so we have a question from Plastic People Records. Have Windows Cubase 12 Pro and previous, never deleted the old, say 10 Pro, nervous of deleting, causing issues, or lost project. Is it safe and best practice? Does it take much hard disk room? You know, I tend to leave the, earlier versions on just in case. You don't really have to. It doesn't take that much hard disk space. The thing that takes a lot of the hard disk space is often the content that comes with, like the samples for Groove Agent or Howling in Sonic, or, the different loops in samples that come with it that often, and that's going to be kind of shared between the different versions. So there's, unless you're really hard up for hard disk space, I would just leave it just in case. But, once it's kind of migrated to preferences and presets over of your setup of 10, there's no technical reason to leave it on unless you know that, this plugin will never work on Apple M1 native processors, so I should run it in an earlier version under Rosetta or something like that. So, all right, so we have question from Ace Amadeus. Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well. Could you please explain MIDI Learn and how to use it? Thanks. So a lot of times when you get into different functions, like for instruments, like you may want to have kind of a tactile control for a particular function. So say I want to go to retro log. I have this particular sound. and let's say I wanted a knob to move this particular parameter. So all you would have to do is to right click and say learn CC. And now as I move the parameter, move the fader from my controller keyboard, I could control that particular parameter. So we say, okay, I wanted to control my cutoff. So I could click on learn CC, move the knob, and now that knob in my controller is just controlling that function. That's what the MIDI learn allows you to do. So it's a quick way, and not every plugin will support that particular function. A lot of them will, so that you could just, oh, I want this to control this right now, so I could just simply have complete control over that. All right, so we see question. I am facing a problem with ASIO for all. When I'm using Cubase, audio from other sources is not rendering. So what other sources are you using? Are they instruments or audio files, or is it coming in from something like YouTube or like a web interface, or like something from the computer system audio? If you're expecting it to be able to ASIO for all to capture the audio from YouTube playback into Cubase, it's probably not going to do that, and it's not really what ASIO for all is intended to do. So if you could be a little more specific, this is from Gurjot Singh, that'd be great. And glad that you finally got your question in. All right, so we have a question from Benny. His question is from Sweden. And then my chat field just jumped to me. Just try and find my spot. Okay. All right, so Benny's question. When I want to change the BPM on all audio tracks, not all audio tracks follow, even though they are all in musical mode in Cubase 12 Pro. All right, so let's go ahead. I'll just revert this. So, musical mode could be set in two different areas. One could be for the track. And you could also have audio for the events. So what you want to do, like right now, if I select all of my events here, so I'm going to select all the audio, and then let's say I have it set to musical mode. All right, but let's say I have one of them that isn't. So we could have the musical mode set on the tracks, but often what we need to do is, let's say as we're playing here, so I have musical mode. Let me just get my inserts here, get rid of that. All right, so we have musical mode set. So right now my origin tempo is like 100 beats a minute. So now this one event doesn't have musical mode turned on. Every other event has musical mode enabled, but we can see that the track itself, now this event on a track could have musical mode turned on. So let's say I wanted these two events to have musical mode, but maybe another event doesn't have musical mode. So make sure that it is the events themselves that have musical mode, and you could see like just a little icon here. You'll see like a little quarter note, so that if that particular event is not set for musical mode, that when I change, all the tracks will change tempo. but my bass won't. But if my bass is set to musical mode, now it's going to automatically follow the tempo. So I got 80. So make sure that you select all the events, and you could also hit Control or Command plus the letter P, which would enter the pool, and make sure that all of the events you'll see musical mode, that you can see a musical mode check here for all of the events. So it'll just be like this little icon here where you see this musical quarter note in the upper right hand corner of the event. So all the tracks could be in musical mode, but the events themselves need to be in musical mode for it to all follow the tempo changes. All right, so we see Volker just says he loves this channel. See, Braxel wants a ribeye steak hot off of the barbecue. Michael Teams is up for that. All right, so Plastic People Records asks, is there a floating fader window only that I could pull up and change depending on which track I'm on? I know the left side, but can I put a fader only window as well? So if you wanted to, go to, so if I have this channel, I could right click and we'll say, now whatever channel it's on. Just jumping back to my original tempo. So as we select different tracks, this is automatically updating. And if you wanted this to only, you could have like your fader, you mentioned that you could have your fader here on the left hand side, which you could do, and that will automatically, whatever track is selected, that will reflect. But if you have this window open, and then if you only wanted to you could choose different functions. So but you could just leave this one particular window set up here, and then that would automatically reflect exactly what is selected as well. So it's not a fader only window, but the channel edit window should do that. Let me know if that would work for you. So Yam asked, and thanks for sharing this, Jazz Dude, is there a function similar to AI knob? AI knob doesn't work on all VSTs, so I would like to know if there's a function that is as simple as an AI knob and works on all VSTs. So what the AI knob does is basically it will migrate like the mouse control wheel. So we could think of it as like a mouse control wheel. So the vast majority of functions and parameters in most software will allow you to hover over it with the mouse control wheel and be able to control that. Now, if the plugin doesn't support that, and that's a pretty basic computing function, that's kind of what the AI knob is doing. It's basically just mimicking the mouse control wheel. So if the plugin doesn't support that, and there are some, then that functionality won't work. And again, it's like contact your plugin developer, and it's a very basic function that you should be able to increment and decrement functions using the using your mouse control wheel. So it's 2023. I think all plugins should be able to do that. But if the plugin doesn't support that, then there's not much to do for controlling through an AI style interface. And thank you, Jazz Dude, for sharing that. All right. See, Ace Amadeus has received 1 gallon of limoncello ice cream from Michael Teams, so he's so kind. All right, Braxel just says, I really appreciate Greg for doing these streams. Thank you. So you're welcome. Just glad to help. It's good to be back after vacation. Sorry, my voice is a little rough sounding. Seeing great discussion of Texas steakhouses. Okay, so we see clarification from Patrick Emanuel A. Says, what I mean is, and this is with the randomizing CC for MIDI notes. So his question is, there's clarification, sorry for misunderstanding. What I mean is have some random notes, and I have pitch bend and modulation on B1. Now with the MIDI logical editor, I want to copy and paste those modulations to only B1 notes on the entire song, wherever B1 appears. Okay, so let me just... Alright, so just enter in some notes here. All right, so let's say we have some notes here. All right, and we have some B1 notes, and I'll just... All right, so I'll take it out of step entry. All right, and I'll just mute the underlying drum event. Okay, so let's say we're going to switch it over to modulation here. Okay, so let's say we're going to select this note, and we may have to build kind of a macro for this, but let's see if we go to our MIDI logical editor that we want not to transform, but to copy. Type is equal to notes. I'll remove this. So what we're going to do is copy this CC1 data, and let's say if I select another B1 note, paste. All right, so let's say if I come here, So copy this, and I'll just see if we come. Okay. All right, so let me just okay, so if we have this, all right, so let me see if this will copy. That will go to another B1 note and paste. Okay, so let's see if we could save preset. All right, and let's see. Okay, so now anytime we come over here, we could just kind of paste that location. All right, so we'll just come over here, select. We'll say notes that are equal to B1. Okay, so we may have to kind of play with the cursor here. So let's say position. All right. All right, so what I think you could do, and I could spend some more time work on this, is maybe just kind of I'll take a quick stab at the macro, and I can have it dialed in for Friday. But we'll come over here to new macro. All right, so we'll say new. All right, so it's good, and just all right, so we'll come over, we'll set our left and right locators around. All right, let's go to our project logical editor, or MIDI logical editor rather. So go to process logical editor presets. All right, just open up my MIDI logical editor. Get the name of the preset. That's not it, so okay, copy CC1 in range. Okay. All right, and now we'll just try paste. All right, let's add that. I think we need to do the select MIDI notes before that. All right, let me just... see if I can find where the preset was I just made. All right. All right, so it might be kind of a combination, but let's see if we could run this macro now. But I think, that we could do something similar to that. So if I wanted to now PL paste, and then everyone PL paste. So after doing it once, you could just do. So I'll play around with it, but once you hit P, that will set the locators. Hit L for locate to that particular note. So let's say if I take these notes here, that anytime I grab this, you can hit P, set the locator, and then paste. So select the note, set the left and right locators, PL, Control, or Command V, that you could just paste. So let me know if that's kind of what you do. I'll kind of get the navigation to like the next particular B1 note if you want, but let me know if that's kind of what you wanted to do, Patrick. I'll spend some time on it before Friday's live stream, see if I get it kind of totally dialed in for you. Oh, so wonderful to see Vinny Sabatino checking in from a hot Orlando, Florida. Glad you can make it today. Great to see you back. All right. Well, always great to see Bruce Bruton back from Simi Valley. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we see from Belly H, hi bro, how do we swing the EQ in Cubase 12 Pro? I'm not sure what you mean by swing the EQ. Like if you want it to, come over, let's say if I want to take, like I'm not sure if it's like an LFO that you want to do, but let's say if I'm here on a track, so let's say I have this, and I wanted to right click, we go to show that in our frequency audio track. And then if I wanted to just grab, like, let's say my square wave that we could just kind of draw in. And we could change kind of the frequency of that, or, you know, so let's say if I come here and let's say I want to do maybe more like parabola with that, and let's go ahead and so if you wanted to do stuff like this with the EQ, so let me know. So you can take any of the VST3 plugins all have this capability. Not all support it, but you know, right click and then you could draw in. So let me know if that is what swinging the EQ is to you. Usually swing, I think it was like a kind of a rhythmic, like a, you know, Teddy Riley New Jack swing. But let me know if that is what you want to accomplish. All right, so a question from Patrick. Greg, on chord pad in pattern section, I know we can play own pattern, drag and drop it, but it plays according to the chords. But is there a way to insert multiple patterns, like on C, it play one, in G, it play different? So when we go to the chord patterns, you know, the concept of when we do patterns in the chord pads is that, you know, we take the same pattern and then we could, at that point, so we come over to, you know, so we have kind of one pattern for, you know, for different, you know, one pattern that would be for different chords, but you could have two different tracks that are playing two different patterns. But when we go to, you know, when we go to a pattern here and it's kind of dragged from a MIDI loop, that's going to be the same pattern across all the different keys, but you could have one track set with a pattern, one track set with block chords, and another track, you know, set for, you know, sections if you wanted to. But it's going to be the same pattern, and the concept is that you can take the pattern and play that particular pattern across the different chords here. And if you wanted to, you know, trigger different patterns, you know, you could use even Groove Agent to do that with the patterns. All right, so we have a question from Enzo Mag. Hi, Greg. How to fix or balance a wave with the sample is recorded, left side is higher than the right side? Okay, so let's say we have, I'll just create a new audio track here. And we'll create a scenario here. I may just think I may have one set up in our project. It might, or I'll just do it here. Okay, and I'm going to route this to just a group track. I'm going to kind of alter it here. Okay, so let's say we have a test tone plugin. So we'll come over here and go to tools. I'm just going to do test generator, and I'm going to pan this track a little bit here. So we look at it, and this track is going out to our group channel. We'll go to our mixer, so we can see like on this track we have like the left and right aren't really equal. We want the left and right channels to be equal. If we go to the panner here, we could say let's go to our stereo combined panner, and then what you could do is you could just visually kind of EQ it and pan it so that the levels are the same. So just switch over to, I guess you could probably do it with the balanced panner too, and just make sure that those levels, and adjust the panning so that they're similar. So try just adjusting the panner so that way, you know, if we're directly in the center, we can see that it's going to be offset, but all you'd have to do is just simply pan, and you could test the levels, you know, and just kind of eyeball the levels right there and check it out and see. I think that will do the trick for you. Let me know if that makes sense. So try just adjusting the panning until it's evened out. All right, so you see from Creative Connections, says it would be so cool if we could record a video at the same time as all the inputs from an interface straight into Cubase. But the tricky part is that, you know, if you're recording your video, that most audio interfaces wouldn't necessarily resolve to the timing of the video, so the clock may not be working, and then there's no correlation between the clocks. So that could be the tricky part, because most people don't have video interfaces with time code output for capturing, but I'll pass it along as a suggestion. All right, so we see from Thermonuclear War, we need mastering miracle tools. So I think Wavelab is a pretty miraculous tool for mastering. So if you haven't checked that out. All right, so we see beats and meets, and it's going back to our comping question with multiple drum tracks. All right, let's see if we still have it open. And he says, that's what I was looking for, but I seem to have screwed up an option somewhere, because command is what gives me the scissors icon when using the comp tool. When I do that, it does the play scrub function instead of actually cutting the lanes. What do I do? So, you know, if it's, so again, when, you know, the default state is, you know, command will play a particular function. So let me just come here to, so command will play, you know, with our comp tool. So if we're here, I'll make this the active project, that would help. All right, so as soon as we go to, let's say, our snare, and I'll just open the lanes here. Just made all these a little too short. So, you know, as, and I'll just turn this up so we can hear it a little easier. So, you know, in here, it's the Alt Option key is what splits and command plays. Now, if that is not set up, go to Preferences and then go to Tool Modifiers and go to, let's see if we see the comp tool. Sometimes you could modify the parameters, but it doesn't look like the comp tool is modified. Let me just, Let's see if it's... So maybe if you go to the split tool, check out your under preferences, editing tool modifiers. Maybe the split tool is set to something else besides option, and see if that does it. But in that area of the program, but it's always going to be just by default. Command will play a particular event, and alt option will split. So alt option and then command, but check that preference for the split tool. Again, come here to preferences, to editing, to tool modifiers, and then see if you could adjust maybe the split tool, see if that is set to option or alt, and check that out. All right, so we see question. I was wondering if there was an option to know how much polyphony is in use in a project. Usually it's going to be not so much. I don't know of a way of showing it in a project. Usually the instruments themselves may show that. But as it's probably dynamically changing, I don't know of a way to automatically say, okay, this project is 128 or 3,412 voices of polyphony at once. So it's usually the instruments that would show that, but I don't know of a function, and if you needed maximum polyphony used at one point or polyphony throughout the whole project. So, it used to be more of a concern when, obviously we had hardware instruments that would have limited polyphony, and, we're always like super careful when you're trying to use, like in the old days, like a Proteus, and you had 32 voices of polyphony, and you're like very carefully programming MIDI to not exceed 32 voices on a particular instrument. And then obviously we got into like the JV1080 generation where it's like 64 voices of polyphony, and then you layer 3 sounds and then, play one chord and it's, 30 voices of polyphony are gone. But I don't know anything in Cubase that would automatically just determine that for you. Sorry about that. All right, so we see from Insane, just says, I really don't get the comping tool in my workflow. I just don't, never will, sadly. So, let me know, what your workflow is. If you're doing stuff with, multi-tracks, or you're doing like an individual part. If you're doing just an individual part, what the comp tool does, and I would think it does it pretty elegantly, is... I'll show you real quick, just, so if we have multiple performances or takes on a particular track, and we want to assemble the best takes of each, and this is where the comp tool does really well. Or you can say, okay, I just want to take, I have multiple recordings on this track, so I'm going to open up the lanes. I could select the comp tool. So instead of having to, select different parts and then mute all the other parts, I could come over here and say, okay, and I could select different takes. Then I could come over here, audition. Say, oh, I like that one. Let's see how that sounds. And we could select the best parts. And then once we don't want to see this anymore, we select all the great parts, we could just come right over there, and our one part is easily comped using the comp tool. So, but let me know if you have like a different workflow or how you're trying to use the comp tool, and we'll try to help you with that. All right, so we see from Mike says, hello Greg, I use Cubase 10 and have Army Babyface Pro Windows operating system. So far everything's been working great. That's wonderful to hear. All right, so we see question, is there a shortcut to change the grid size? So right now we can come over here, we can see like if we want to switch between bar and beat. So let's say, bar beat quantize or adapt to zoom. So I think if we go over here to our key commands, and I think we could set next grid. Yeah, so right here, if you say grid type, adapt to zoom, grid type bar, and then, so let's say if we have it set to use quantize, all you'd have to do is use key commands, to change your quantize preset. So you could, switch to your different grid types there, and if it's set to quantize, then you could set other key commands just to, I want to go to quarter, to eighth, to 16th, to half, to whole, etc. All right, so we see, and this is probably just a follow-up question from Mike. Says it's been Cubase 10 has Army Babyface Pro FS audio interface Windows operating system. So far, everything's been working well. But suddenly, when the buffer size is less than 512, the sound is lost. Yeah, so if you're in Cubase 12, you're not doing any Atmos stuff. So if there, let me know if there's no sound at all. And we'll assume that you're using the ASIO drivers for the Army Babyface, and you're not using like the Windows sound drivers. So if you could let us know that, but unless there's some conflict, with your system, also, check to make sure, because, make sure that if it's connected via, I think it's probably a Babyface is a USB interface. And if it's a USB interface, make sure that, when you're running lower buffers that you might have to, it's going to be working harder, that maybe it is a USB bus power issue. So, if you're, connected directly to a port, not through a hub, and see if that makes a difference as well. All right, so we see from Patrick, let's see, maybe another follow-up from Mike's. It is important to note this happens when another audio program is running in the background, such as VLC Player or the RME Mix audio interface mixer. Is there a way to solve this problem? All right, so it could be that you may need to go to like your studio and go to Studio Setup, Mike's. And if you come over, let's go to select your Army select your audio system, and then try to check, try toggling this release driver when application is in the background. So, if you're using other programs, they may be taking control of the audio interface. So try to, again, come over here to the audio, to the studio setup. And at this point, just toggle the release driver when application is in background. All right, so Patrick has a question. I have some delay, distortion, panning automation on in track 1. Now I want to copy paste that automation to other tracks for making it similar. How do I do that with Project Logical Editor? Is there a way? So probably the easiest way to do this, and realize that, the automation data, if you copy it from a particular track. So let's say I will just undo my comp here. So I'll just put in some automation data here on track. So I'll just come to inserts. All right, so. Alright, so I'll just automate some different parameters here. And we'll put another kind of nasty sounding plugin on it. We'll just do something super obvious. All right, so, if we had a different track of audio, so, it could depend on if it's going to be a send or an insert. But let's say if we have another audio track, if we just kind of copy this automation to another track and these plugins are not available on on that particular track, you could copy the automation over, but the destination isn't going to be the same. So you might, if you wanted to have the same compression and same flanging, you would have to select, all of the particular automation on this track, and we could just, go to, let's say, the very first automation point here, and shift, double click, and, or let's say, okay, I just wanted to select that automation, you'd have to have the same plugin. And as we do this, we can see that this is going to be tied to the same insert position. So it's not as easy as just kind of you could copy the data over, but if the data is going to, if this is an insert 2 as opposed to insert 1 on a different track, it's going to do different parameters. So make sure that you have the same automation parameters set up, and then you can copy and paste. But it's not as easy as okay, I'm going to take all this automation and drop it into another track, and then the plugins are going to load up in the same exact order. So, so there could be a lot of little gotchas there, because again, it's going to be for insert 1 for this parameter, and if the inserts aren't lined up, then it may not play back as you'd expect it to. All right, get a sip of water. All right. All right, so we see from Meshuggah, I choose payment by bank transfer, and when I wanted to enter the IBAN, I get a pop-up telling me that the number is wrong. Yet that's what I got on the Steinberg site. Can someone tell me what is the problem? So I'm not sure if it is, because it's a different site, because there's the online store is handled by a different company than Steinberg. So, if you're trying to log on with your My Steinberg credentials, those could be different than the online shop. So make sure that you're doing, that you're not trying to use the same credentials. You may have different credentials for the online shop, which is handled by AskNet versus your Steinberg logon account. All right, so Alex Nasla just was asking, hey Greg, thanks for showing me the track versions method of comping. I didn't know about that, but can I quickly scroll through each track version so I can see and hear them quickly with one button? All right, so I think what you could do, let's see if we still have the project open. All right, yeah. So if all of the tracks are selected, all you'd have to do is just come over here. There we could listen to track version 1. We could listen, I'll just put it into a little loop here. So then you can say, okay, let's go to track version 2. Let's go to track version 1. So you could change one, and then all of them will change accordingly. So as soon as you do that, and I think that you could probably, I'm not sure if we'll go to track versions over here. You could just say next version, previous version. There's key commands for that as well. So that way you could just audition quickly the different track versions. Yeah, to see Michael Pierce also is wondering about Steinberg's IBAN, so not sure what the IBAN is. All right, wonderful to see Ted Springman on from Los Angeles. Glad he can make it today. His question is, hi Greg, is there an audio track function in Cubase that would mask all frequencies except one single pitch? I need to repeat across many tracks, so CPU friendly is best. So I'm not sure if it's going to go down to one single frequency, but you might be able to. The thing that's kind of coming to my mind is, let's come over here to like the frequency EQ. Let's see how narrow we can get the Q. Like if we put it into notch. then, just soloing. I think that would be the narrowest that we could get is like a 20 on a Q of notch, but I don't think that's going to be just a single frequency. But let me try and let's see if we go to see if we could get these close enough. I don't think that's going to get close enough. Yes, I think, the narrowest notch you might be able to get is in the frequency EQ, but I don't think it's going to be a single frequency. But let me know if there's, maybe if you want to email me like a particular more details on what you need to do with that, then I might be able to come up with something. I'll play around with it some before Friday's live stream. See, writer Wayland just says this is the best, I guess, ASMR, ASMR. It makes me relax and helps me sleep. Thanks. That's why I get stuck reading to my son every night. So. So we see, I mentioned spectral layers to an engineer friend who records the LA Opera and wants to edit out annoying coughs in pianissimo passages, and he wants to know if SL works with multi-tracks. So sure, you could just simply, take any single audio file and, run. So I'm not sure if, it's going to be done on kind of a file by file basis. So he could do it on multi-tracks, but he may have to take out the cough across multiple tracks, or if he's doing a mix down of, if he has like a stereo mix or a 5-1 mix, at that point you could also just do it on, stereo. And I think you could do surround files as well. I'm pretty sure, but not 100% sure. I haven't tried it yet myself to put on like a 5.1. But, each file you could just simply, take out coughs and stuff like that. It's a great solution for that. Squeaky piano pedals and, trumpet players blowing spit on the floor, stuff like that. Okay, so we see Patrick Emmanuel A asks, need to draw a pitch bend from D1 to D0. Do I need to change any settings of my synth, or changing in Cubase is enough? So how MIDI pitch bend will work is, you could have pitch bend data in. So let's say if we have a part here, I'll just add a quick MIDI note. So let's say as we want to draw in Alright, so I'll just extend this just a little longer. Alright, so when we go to your particular instrument, then we select pitch bend. So we'll come over here and select pitch bend. We will see like our little pitch bend setup window here. So let's say we'll just kind of open this up. We'll see our little settings. So we could have this set here so we can see our grid, so we can see our semitone grids. And let's say we want this value to match what's in the instrument. So if this is set to 12 up and 12 down for pitch bend, but your instrument is not, then the instrument won't actually follow. So you need to have the instrument say, okay, we want to do plus 12 and minus 12. Now we want Cubase to, when we go to our pitch bend setup, to do 12 and minus 12. So we'll come here. So now as we draw in pitch bend data, that we could just have that automatically pitch bend an octave. So, and I don't really have an instrument loaded up, but you need to match the value here and the value in the instrument itself for it to correlate between the two. So. All right, great to see Volker is back. All right, so a couple questions. Greg, how to select multiple notes inside the key editor and draw pitch bend and MPE at the same time? Is it possible? So I think it's going to be basically, the idea is that your controller can draw in, so say if we come over here to our note expression, that as we kind of draw it in, we could draw in kind of, one particular pitch at a time. So let's say, okay, I'll just switch this to tuning. So now, so it's, I think that you could copy that particular pitch bend, but the intention is often that you would use like an MPE style controller, and then Cubase would be able to capture that, so that when you go to look at it, you could at that point just have, so, you're not drawing in 2 or 6 events at the same time with that. So that's going to be, as it is a particular note-based property that, you'd entered in individually. Another question. What's the reason Cubase has the option opening key editor as a separate window? Any specific reason? So many people, when you're working with multiple tracks, will need to see more space. So especially if we wanted to look at, let's see if I have one of my, let's look at like a Bach piece here. So, many film composers will have just a dedicated screen to their, for their key editor, because they, I remember Pinar Toprak, incredibly gifted composer. She's like, I feel sometimes like I see the Cubase key editor more than my kids. So if you're seeing like this type of data, or you can say, okay, I want to see colors by parts, and I want to see 40 or 50 tracks all going on at once to see how my sequence is shaping up, that being able to do that within a full screen editor can make sense for really dense musical passages and parts, and especially when editing multiple events simultaneously. You see that, and to have space for all your controllers. So that's why there's always going to be full screen mode for the key editor. little more water, excuse me. All right, so we see, Greg, I have a bunch of notes with tone, pan, MPE modulations. Is there a way to delete only the MPE data on selected notes? Other modulation remains untouched, or can we do it by MIDI logical editor? Do you have other options? All right, so let me just close this out, and we'll jump back to where we were before here. All right, so let's say we have this. Let's go to our MIDI logical editor. We'll give it a stab. Let's see if we could do it. So let's delete. So we have pitch bend. Let me just, before we do this, I'll draw in some modulation. Okay, so let's come over here to the logical editor. So I think if we do delete VST3 event, sorry about that. We'll try that again. So we can see our VST3 data there, and let's come over here to switch this to mod. All right, so we'll try that MIDI logical editor function again and see if it misbehaves. Let me see which data that is. Let me try just drawing in. Alright, so I'm going to draw in tuning. Yeah, so you could try just deleting, and then you could type is equal to VST3 events. I would think that the all types would work, but let me just try that. Set it here to all types. Yeah, so you could do that using the MIDI logical editor, Patrick. All right, so we have Arif B checking in from Holland. Thanks for joining us. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right. All right, Arif B asks, is it possible to open the mixer and the rack separately in different windows? Okay, so let me just open up project here. Okay, so say we have our rack. All right, so I think that you're always going to have, you might always have the faders. But let me just, yeah, the faders are always going to be there, but you could, have, so we could hide different parts of the mixer, but not the actual faders here. But let's see, and I think that's as small as we can make it, so you could have that for one mixer and go to mixer 2, and if you wanted these to be super tall, you could kind of emphasize one over the other, but I think that the faders will always be present in the mixer. So sorry about that, but you could kind of de-emphasize it with sizing if you wanted to. But I think that people would always, I think the thinking is that they would always have the mixer available in kind of normal mode, and people would be distressed if they open up the mixer without faders in it. See, Volker just says this is the best learning lesson for Cubase. All right. Glad it's helpful for people. Sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Let me see if I can get back. Wonderful to see Graham Witcher on. Okay, so we see from Jared Davis asks, is there a way to quantize the audio object scrub feature? Control Alt plus drag on audio object so that it scrubs in quantized increments. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come here to all right, so say if we're scrubbing, all right, so it says Control Alt drag. All right. All right, right, so we see, is there a way to quantize the audio object scrub feature? So, if it's, I'm not sure if it's like the scrub, and you say, so let me just make some cuts here. So let's say if this is what you mean by kind of scrubbing, it's, usually I would think of scrubbing as being like where we come over, but we could also just come, and I don't think that this is set up, because usually when this tool is used is often just to, when someone's performance was a little bit out of time. So I think that this isn't going to be contingent upon the snap, because we want to do kind of very fine editing here. So if this is what you mean, I think that this will be free form, where, you could just take, a particular hit here and say, okay, we want to take that hit and align it right at that particular grid position where it's going to be a little bit off. But let me know if that's kind of what you were thinking, but I don't think that would automatically comply and snap, because, it's one of those edits that, you move it because it is off and you wanted it to freely place things very easily. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Okay, we see Michael Pierce has to finish up some edits. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you on the live stream, Michael. Hope you're well. So we see Benny says this question about musical mode. All events are in musical mode, but it still doesn't follow. It has also happened that particular track gets slower. One of the things that it could be is check the algorithm, because if the track is getting slower, it could be in like a tape machine. There's tape mode, and this is to mimic like a vary speed on an analog recorder, so that as you slow down, that the pitch would slow down, kind of like you're slowing down analog tape and speeding it up. So make sure that the algorithms are all set to time when you're doing that, Benny. And you could also see the algorithms are being used in the pool window. So make sure that, like if one of them is set, like if we have our bass part here set to elastic tape, that now when we change the tempo, so not only does it change out of time, but it will change pitch, like you're mimicking analog tape vary speed recording. I see very kind words from Volker. It says, I wish I could be 14 and Greg would be my mentor. I'm honored. So I wish I could be 14 and my mentor too. All right, so we see a question. In digital Cubase Pro 12, does it matter to do pregame before running through stock inserts and strip channel, or effects and quality will be the same if I bring up the volume at the end? So, sometimes when we're looking at, the channel structure, the gain structure, some people will like to bring up the gain really hard, and this gain here is before the channel, before the inserts, before the channel strip, before our volume here. So some people, if your gain structure, is way too hot, then you may want to attenuate the gain before it hits the compressor. Some people like to add a lot of gain and then really compress very heavily a particular part to get a certain tonality. So, it could really depend upon the project. So some people will, try to make up for gain problems with this before, so that everything's kind of hitting, if you have like, 8 tracks of drums, but the kick is way too hot in comparison to everything else, you may just attenuate that up. But let's say the bass wasn't recorded hot enough and you're not getting enough gain to drive the compressor, then you may add more gain to drive the compressor. So either way, it's always going to be kind of clean gain. So it's not like an analog mic pre that's going to, often color the particular sound. So, but, depending on the situations, I would say that probably if you're getting a project where someone wasn't really aware or cognizant of their gain structures, at that point you may want to, you'd be more apt to use it, is kind of what I've found personally. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. How's it going? You probably already answered this question a million times, but is there a way to undo the volume change caused by accidentally points in the group tracks? So, sorry, let me just get the wrong key there. Get my computer back. All right. So if you accidentally have, made a gain adjustment in the mixer, so let's say if I have these going to a group channel. All right. And you accidentally like, oh, I came here, and now everything is completely ruined. There's these little undos that you could use right here in the mixer, or you could hit Alt or Option plus Z, or Alt and Option plus Shift plus Z to redo. So we could think of the mixer as an edit undo is Control or Command Z. A mixer undo is Alt or Option plus Z or Shift to redo. So if you wanted to undo like an accidental mixer move, like, oh, everything's perfect, and I just mess it up and I don't have any confidence I'll get it back to where it was, just Alt or Option Z, or you could use kind of the arrows here. And if we go into like your full mixer view, let me just go back to my mixer setup. And we have our left and right zone. You could click on your mixer history, and then you could just come over here and see all of your mixer changes directly there. All right, wonderful to see Nick. And he's apologizing for being late, which you don't have to be. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see from, I think it's Robbie or Roby and Becky. Cheers, Greg. Just for fun, can you share one creative and musical thing that you've stumbled upon doing something really technical? Trying to think anything kind of comes to mind. I don't get to stumble across too many things. I can't really. I'll put it in kind of the back of my mind to see if something kind of comes to mind, but nothing is really kind of jumping out at me. But I will try to think of one as maybe we'll come up with something as the live stream goes on today. So we still have about a half hour left. All right, so we see from Plastic People Records, and we're just probably clarification from earlier. Event 1 rendered audio 4-bar loop with 1-bar tail, delay throw. Throw starts at bar 5, take events and duplicate across. Pull start of event 2 back. All right, so let's just kind of create this again. Right, so okay, so rendered 4-bar loop, rendered audio 4 bars. All right, let me just. Okay, so I'll just add delay on here. Okay, so let's say, okay, so rendered 4-bar, audio 4-bar with 1-bar delay tail throw. Throw starts in bar 5. Take the event and duplicate across. Okay, so, all right, so I will just go ahead and okay, so let's render in place. All right, and we'll add a bar here. There, sorry, just didn't need to set that. Okay, so now we'll listen to this. All right. Now we have our delay throw. All right. Take the event and duplicate. Okay. Throw starts in bar 5. Take event and duplicate across. Pull start of event 2 back so that it starts. All right. So let's. All right. Take event and duplicate across. Okay, so we'll do that. Come over. Okay. Pull start of event 2 back. So it starts on the end of bar 4. Okay. Overlaps but now fits on. Can the end throw of event 1 play dubbed? Okay, so I think if you wanted to do that, between these two events, just crossfade these two events. So now and then you could edit the crossfade if you wanted it to be, like more contiguous sounding. So try to come over here and adjust kind of, and if we wanted to come here, we could just, let's just change to equal gain settings. So, play around, but, try doing it as just a crossfade between the two, and then they'll both sound at the same time. So, and you could kind of tweak the crossfade. So let me know if that will work for you, Plastic People Records. All right. All right, so we see from Beats and Meats, hey Greg, I got the comping drums thing all figured out. I had changed the select tool split modifier, which messed up some things, and now I switched slip events to option plus shift, and everything is perfect. Great. Now you could enjoy your popcorn from earlier. But glad you got it sorted out. All right. I know we had some questions that were sent in advance, so let me get to those before we run out of time. Thank you for all the wonderful questions from everyone. Hope everyone's learned a new tip or trick. All right. All right, so we had a question. Hi, is there any way to make the lower zone, mix console, etc. become the right zone instead? I'm looking at getting a large monitor to replace my 2-monitor setup. I currently have the project on the left screen and the mix console on the right screen. I'd like to become one solid window instead with the project on the left and mixer on the right, so that I have what I have now, but as of one window and one monitor, it'd be easier to size and snap it to the screen using Mac OS. I'm not a fan of having the mixer in the lower zone, so to me it makes both the project and the mixer and hard to see all details. And I think I read maybe a further comment that you had on Facebook about this, but like I currently have like one 1920 by 1080 screen, so typical 1080p. But let's say if I wanted to resize this particular screen here, the only way to really do it, it's going to be 2 separate windows, because that's what it is. They are 2 separate windows, so you may have to just come over and have, and this would obviously look more full, but if we go to let's say we go to your studio, we open up our mix console, and now all right, so let's get to your mix console here. It would have to kind of just be the 2 separate windows placed side by side. And once you have this kind of set up, you should be able, once you have the window set up, if you wanted to recall, this way you can go to your mixer, and obviously if you have kind of like an ultra wide screen, you'd see kind of like the full mixer and full project window. But once you're there, and if you're afraid of it getting kind of bumped around, really all you'd have to do is to come over here and just add a global workspace, so that you could always hit one button and the mixer and everything is set up exactly as you want. But the lower zone is the lower zone, and if you do have an ultra wide monitor, you may be able to see more stuff. There's some people will have their project window spread across and have the mixer as a separate window directly underneath it. But if you have kind of the left-right orientation, like for the project window on the left and the mix console on the right, this is a pretty easy thing to do. But it's not going to be one window because they are two windows with two different things, and you won't expect the events to carry over into the mixer window. So that's why two different functions for two different windows. All right. I'll just clear my throat real quick. All right. So, is there a way to have color coding waveforms based upon frequency information? I believe this could be a very useful tool in both production, sketching, and mixing stages for developing balancing projects and mixing them for efficiently, effectively, and quickly. And they kind of sent a video in our program that had like bass frequencies one color, mid frequencies another color, and high frequencies yet a different color. And I think it's kind of a personally I think it's a little gimmicky, and I think that a lot of files, like if you have a drum loop that has low, mids, and highs, won't automatically colorize based upon frequency content. So there isn't a way to do it in Cubase to have the event colors based on frequencies, but most of the times you're going to have if we think about the harmonic overtone series that are going to be present in audio files, I think the vast majority of those frequencies, each of those parts would, unless it's very specifically sculpted, would often have more than one frequency, and it would kind of negate the functionality. And I'm not sure if it would actually help you mix any better, knowing that, this color is low frequencies versus mids or highs. All right, another question. Are there any hardware joystick panners that you could recommend with Cubase for surround and Atmos? So I think, I've seen some people have like a little, I've seen some gaming controllers. And the tricky thing is I think Harrison, the console manufacturer, owns like the motorized joystick control. And they own the patent for it, and I think Yamaha even owns like the motorized fader control, and they could always exercise it when needed. But I've seen a lot of people use a 3D mouse, which is a mouse that you can elevate up and down to do the height positioning. So that may be something. And I've seen some joysticks, I think, that have like a little, almost like a little button that moves vertically up and down, and you might be able to map that, but there's none that like come immediately to mind that isn't like if you wanted to spend like $1,000, $1,200, JL Cooper may have something that may not be supported. But check out like a 3D mouse. I've seen some people use that. I've seen it used in demonstrations at trade shows from companies that are doing Atmos stuff. So question, I want to see if I could do random quantization in Cubase 11. I have played in a piano piece and did hard quantization at 100%. Now that I have all my notes all the way I want them, can I now set a quantization value in Cubase away from 70% to the lowest 80% for the highest throughout the piece to give it a more natural feel? I've adjusted the velocity, but wanted to check on a quantization. So if we have, let me just open up a different project here. So all right, so say we'll go to our chord track here and have some chords. And I'll go to this Rhodes patch, and we'll say chords to MIDI. All right, so now we have, let's say, just so so one of the things that you could do is, let's look at like the MIDI data here, is going into, so right now probably everything is perfectly quantized on this, and if we don't necessarily want that, try going into and you may, like, once you come to the MIDI part, you'll see like a MIDI modifiers. So let's just come over here. Okay, so we're going to go to our MIDI modifiers, and here we could do like just some random target. So we could say, let's just randomize our position, and we could say, okay, let's make it like, 20 and minus 20. And what this will do is actually on playback, so it's not going to shift any of the notes, but on playback, now we could come over here and I'll take it off loop. So now I think that even if I go to MIDI, if I wanted to kind of embed that if we choose freeze MIDI modifiers, that now we could, see that we'll have just some randomness in the start of particular notes, so that as we do this, it's not going to be perfectly on all the time. So, try, on the MIDI part, just get to your MIDI modifiers and just do randomized position, and you could kind of set the amount and realize that you may not see it shift until you go to MIDI and then go to freeze MIDI modifiers. But at that point, you could have just like little subtle tempo changes, and you could have the playback, and that this is kind of happening in real time. The notes will all print out and be edited perfectly in time, but you could just kind of give it a more natural human feel that way. All right, so you see a question. Hi Greg, hope you're doing well. Tell me please if there's a way to get a full project initially fixed in the key of C but finally sounding better in D. For that I've used a transpose track and wish I can now work in that very key of D with a non-transposed new Cubase 12 Pro project. Thanks a lot. So I think so let's come over here and I'll just do new project, and we'll do just a quick Alright, and I'll just drag in a quick loop. Alright, and let's go ahead and we'll just drag in a quick audio file as well. Alright, so now when we come add a transpose track here. All right, so say we took it up a major second. And let me see if we do a render in place, if that transpose takes effect. It may not. All right, so now that we have, I'm going to get rid of the transpose track. So that's our original key. And now that we rendered in place, it's taking into account of the transpose track. So then you could start in C, do a transpose track, render it, and turn it into the new key. So just again, this is the original key. And now that we rendered in place with the transpose track, and the transpose track is now muted. So just do a render in place with your transpose track, and then I think you should be all set. All right, and just one quick note, just in case people didn't hear, like someone asked about Cubase IC Pro for Android a couple months ago. So that was just released last week. It's currently on sale. So if you've been looking for like a remote control software for Android, so I got it for my Samsung phone. It's working really well. So just a quick heads up with that Cubase, is available like 8 years ago, and people kept asking for it. So it's now available again for Android. So just a quick heads up on that. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. So we see question, is there anything about upgrade on Cubase 13? Just know that, generally Steinberg doesn't announce anything until it's released. It's just kind of a bad tease for customers. But rest assured that, all the people at Steinberg are constantly working on new stuff. So we see, and further comment, I don't know what could be added newer Cubase 13 because Cubase 12 is highly loaded. Okay, so we see question, what happened to Hypersonic? So Hypersonic was developed in conjunction with a company called Wizu, and then Wizu was acquired by Digidesign at the time, and then they were sold off to N Music, and then kind of sold off again and changed names. So Steinberg doesn't have the ownership to that. We did the distribution for it, but it's been discontinued for 20 years. So, consider checking out Hallian Sonic instead. So we see question, is there a way to record the quarter MIDI output if you put it on a MIDI inserts? All right, so let's say we have a patch here. All right, so I will go ahead and mute these. All right, so what I want to do is let's go to our quarter plugin. So we're going to go to MIDI inserts. And let's get to quarter. All right, and I'll just load up a quick preset here. Let's do some jazz. All right, so I'm basically triggering one note and playing the chords. So if I wanted to be, super clever, what I would do is just click on this little record button here. And then as I record into Cubase, I'll just mute. I play one note. now we could see that all the data that's been recorded is in fact the chords that were generated by the Quarter program. So on the MIDI insert, you just want to click right here in this record, and that will record the result of the MIDI plugin directly into the MIDI event itself. See, I just see Hallian sonic tones are not as rich as hypersonic. So I think if you listen to a lot of the Hallian sonic stuff, that it's, now that it's, I think it's much better than hypersonic was. And it works in your latest operating systems. Always wonderful to see Tiago from Brazil. Thank you for your video. I didn't get a chance to thank you while I was on vacation. It was wonderful. See, Daniela Tocan just says, my timecode video audio synchronizer is pretty expensive, but it's important. So it is. And they are very expensive, and not many people do them correctly. So that's why they're expensive. Okay, so we have Welcome Dudes, just says, hello Greg, I have Cubase 12 Pro. Is Spectral Layers included? Cannot open it, thank you. So it's Spectral Layers 1. You'll see it in the download, in the Steinberg download assistant, but the Spectral Layers 1 is included, not Spectral Layers Elements or Pro, so just Spectral Layers 1. And to access it, what you do is on any audio file, you'll see extensions, and then you'll see like your spectral layers there, and you could run it as an ARA2 extension. All right, so we have Tall Sizer just saying hi from Phoenix. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see, is any chance to get it Spectral Layers 1 from somewhere else? Thanks. So it's not sold separately, but Spectral Layers Elements and Spectral Layers Pro are. So if you're a Steinberg customer, you get to get Spectral Layers 1, with your Cubase. I think it's in Cubase Artist and Cubase Pro. All right, so we see make LFO, but cursor inexactly move. What can I do? So I'm not sure how you're, if you're doing the LFO from like the LFO MIDI plugin, or, so let's say if you have a MIDI track, there's a MIDI insert for auto LFO. So I'm not sure if you're doing that, or if you're just kind of drawing in like automation parameters and doing something like this. But let's say I want to, I have snap enabled here, so just the letter J. So now when I try to draw in, it's going to just snap directly to the grid like that. So you can see they do that. So if you're entering in stuff with the drawing tools, make sure that you have snap turned on. So we see Gladicus says, great live stream, thanks for doing this. So you're welcome. We try to do it every Tuesday and Friday whenever I can. It was missed last week, and missed interacting with everyone last week while I was on vacation. So we see, can Hallian 7 load and play sound font? So I'm pretty sure that it does. I haven't tried in forever, but I believe it is one of, can load up different file formats. I believe sound fonts is available as an option there. All right, so we see Michael Pierce has finished his edit, bounced and packaged, all ready for tomorrow. That's great. Thanks for coming back to join us. All right, always wonderful to see Sable Winters on. And yes, we had a wonderful, relaxing vacation. All right, so we see David M. just says, not something I needed until now. The import audio CD page does not work when I tried it. Any idea what that is, please? Cubase is registering the CD player over USB. So I don't have a CD player on this particular computer, but I did do it not too long ago, but I don't have a drive to test it with. And it could be that, let me know if you see the CD here, and you might have to just place a check on the CD tracks that are available. I'll check it out on my PC, and if you want to check with me on Friday's live stream. All right, so we have a question. When I'm on the track and use my scroll on my mouse, the volume on the track is turned with my scroll as well. Is it possible to turn it off? So I think it's a preference. So let's come over here to preferences, and I think maybe under editing, there's like a use scroll wheel for volume only kind of function. But there is like a preference for it. Let me just see. All right, so go to editing to audio and try unchecking use mouse wheel for event volume and fades and see if that does it. All right, so with that, I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. We'll be back. Sorry, I still have like another 30 minutes of questions, but we'll be back at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time on Friday. So again, you can send questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And thank you for all the wonderful questions. And I hope that everyone stays safe and happy and well. And we want everyone to come back on Friday and bring all your great questions. And we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for spending part of your afternoon with us. And we will see you on Friday. Thank you very much. Goodbye.